Try and find a horror fan who doesn't love a franchise. Much as we all adore original horror movies, there's something to be said for getting lost in a decade-spanning saga of films with rich lore and recurring characters. The ongoing nature of most horror franchises means that, after a point, a prominent actor might take a leave of absence for one of many reasons, only to circle back to the series many years or even decades later. Perhaps an actor is lured back by a promising script, a desire to return to their roots, or simply a nice fat paycheck. Whatever the reason, the following actors all came back to the horror franchises that helped make them famous a long time later. While there's never any guarantee that bringing a legacy actor back is going to work out well, as this list will certainly be a testament to, it's a nevertheless inherently neat thing to see an original star coming back to their old genre stomping ground after so much time. And that, of course, is why studios will keep banking on the nostalgia-fueled casting until the heat death of the universe. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 actors who returned to horror franchises years later. Number 10, Matthew Lillard and Scott Foley, Scream. The Scream franchise's ever-excitable fanbase collectively lost their you-know-what when it was recently announced that series alums Matthew Lillard and Scott Foley would both be returning to the slasher IP in the upcoming Scream 7. Lillard, whose villain Stu Macher died at the end of the original Scream, is back 30 years later after his last appearance, while Foley, who played Scream 3's solo killer Roman Bridger, will return 26 years after he perished on screen. While there's been long-time speculation about the possibility of Stu having miraculously survived having a TV dropped on his head, it's far more likely that Lillard and Foley will either appear as visions, like those of Skeet Ulrich's Billy Loomis in the last two movies, or as part of a flashback sequence. It's even been speculated that Scream 7's opening kill could be Sidney Prescott's own mother Maureen, who we know was murdered by Stu and Billy at the behest of Roman. Either way, this wild announcement sure is one hell of a way to reignite flagging fan interest in Scream 7, follow the unceremonious departures of Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega. The recent announcement that David Arquette will be returning as Dewey as well only fuels this interest. Number 9, Danielle Harris, Halloween. Though Jamie Lee Curtis has pulled this trick twice in the Halloween franchise, first returning 17 years after Halloween 2, or Halloween H2O, and then 16 years after Halloween Resurrection for 2018's Halloween, she's actually been outdone entirely by a fellow cast member. Danielle Harris was introduced in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, as Laurie Strode's young daughter Jamie Lloyd, and though she returned for the 5th film, she ultimately dropped out of the 6th Halloween due to a salary dispute. That seems to be the end of Harris's tenure in the series, then until she made a surprise return in Rob Zombie's 2007 Halloween reboot, where she played a new version of one of the original film's victims, Annie Brackett. This came 18 years after Harris's prior appearance in Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, and though Annie dies in the original Halloween, here she survives, allowing Harris to return in Halloween 2, where she's finally taken out for good by Michael, played by the monstrous Tyler Mane. There is a fun little fact though, there is one actress who has beaten both Jamie Lee Curtis and Danielle Harris in terms of her appearances between Halloween films. Kyle Richards played Lindsay in the original Halloween and returned in Halloween Kills, making a whopping gap of 43 years between appearances in the Halloween franchise. Number 8, Bruce Campbell, Evil Dead. More so than any other actor on this list, Bruce Campbell is his franchise. Even with the Evil Dead having produced 2 movies without Campbell's Ash Williams, he remains its undeniable mascot. That's all the more impressive given the lengthy chasm of time between some of his live-action appearances, namely the 23-year gap between 1992's Army of Darkness and the hit TV show Ash vs. the Evil Dead. Now, technically, Campbell did make a 5-second post-credits cameo in 2013's Evil Dead reboot, yet given that it's such a brief nothing burger of a cameo and has no canonical bearing on the story, it barely feels worth counting. And even if you did count it, that's still 21 years between appearances as Ash. With Ash vs. the Evil Dead's cancellation in 2018, however, Campbell announced his retirement from portraying Ash in live-action form, so don't expect to see him showing up in the live-action franchise again, not even in wink-wink cameo form. Now that presumably does not exclude vocal cameos, as he lent his voice to the recent film Evil Dead Rise, directed by Lee Cronin. Number 7, Alex Vincent, Child's Play. Alex Vincent rose to fame as Andy Barkley, the adorable young lead of the original Child's Play, and though he returned for Child's Play 2 in 1990, the filmmakers decided to cast an older teenage Andy for Child's Play 3, released the very next year, with Justin Whalen replacing a too young Vincent. With Andy exiting the franchise after Child's Play 3 and Vincent more or less retiring from acting, the door was seemingly closed on him ever returning to Child's Play. But this only made it all the more triumphantly surprising when Vincent came back to portray an adult Andy Chucky in a post-credits cameo in 2013's Curse of Chucky, an entire 23 years after his last appearance. Better yet, this wasn't a mere throwaway fan service cameo. Vincent additionally returned for a major role in sequel Cult of Chucky, and even went on to play Andy in a recurring capacity in the recently cancelled Chucky TV series. This also opened the door for Andy's sister Kyle, played by Christina Elise in Child's Play 2, to make a brief cameo in Cult of Chucky 27 years later, before also appearing on the TV show. Number 6. Shawnee Smith, Saw. Shawnee Smith played Jigsaw's most iconic apprentice, Amanda Young, in the original trilogy, and though she died at the end of Saw 3, a fact that remains hugely controversial with fans, she nevertheless returned for a flashback cameo in Saw 6 in 2009. The franchise seemed to move on from Amanda at this point then, but that all changed when, after numerous failed attempts to soft reboot the series, Saw X was developed as an interquel set between the first two movies. And so Amanda was brought back into the fold as Jigsaw's still-alive apprentice, allowing Smith to reprise the role for the first time in 14 years. Heck, even the god-awful wig they saddled Smith with couldn't undermine the fan-serving appeal of seeing her back in this role and playing opposite Tobin Bell once again. While it remains to be seen when Saw 11 is actually released, it's said to be a direct sequel to Saw 10, which should mean we'll get to see Smith back playing Amanda once again. Number 5. Bill Hinzman, Night of the Living Dead. Now here's a fascinating one. You might not know the name Bill Hinzman, but you almost certainly recognize his face. Hinzman played Zombie Number 1 in George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, the iconic cemetery ghoul encountered by Barbara and Johnny at the very start of the 1968 undead classic, which went on to spawn a franchise of Romero-directed zombie flicks. While this small but memorable role seemed like an absolute one-off, Hinzman was ultimately given the opportunity to reprise it in Night of the Living Dead 30th Anniversary Edition. This was a modified cut of Romero's film created by original writer John Russo, featuring a new musical score and new scenes written and directed by Russo himself. One of these sequences saw Hinzman reprise the role of Zombie Number 1, where it's revealed that he was an executed child murderer who was being buried on the day that the undead apocalypse took hold, leading to the events of the original 68 film. Fan reception to the 30th Anniversary Edition is wildly mixed at best, and there's no getting around Hinzman unavoidably looking much older in the new footage, but it was certainly a wildly left-field way to bring the actor back. Number 4. Cheryl Lee, Twin Peaks. Cheryl Lee is the undeniable face of the Twin Peaks franchise, no matter that her character Laura Palmer is killed at the very start of the TV series. David Lynch was so impressed with Lee's acting abilities that he wrote flashbacks featuring Laura into the series, and later even cast Lee as another character, Laura's cousin Maddie. Yet Lee was well and truly given her time to shine the year after Twin Peaks' cancellation, when she starred in the 1992 prequel film Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me. Though the film was indifferently received by critics at the time and commercially unsuccessful, Lee's performance was widely praised, even receiving an Independent Spirit Award nomination for Best Actress. Fire Walk with Me's box office failure nevertheless nixed plans for 2 follow-up films, when Lynch ultimately didn't return to the world of Twin Peaks until 2017's long-awaited 3rd season. Lynch brought back as many cast members as humanly possible for season 3, with Lee appearing as Laura in 3 episodes, an entire quarter-century after she last played the part. Number 3. Tony Todd, Candyman. The late, great Tony Todd's unmistakably gravelly voice and imposing presence made him an instant icon in the original Candyman, after which he returned for 2 undeniably inferior sequels, with Candyman 3 Day of the Dead releasing direct-to-video in 1999. The franchise then went dormant for an entire 22 years, until it was resurrected in 2021 with a direct sequel to the original 1992 film that nevertheless served as a soft reboot of sorts. Though Todd wasn't brought back to play the main Candyman this time around, likely in part due to his age and the physicality the part requires, he did briefly appear as a digitally de-aged visage of his OG Candyman, adding some welcome connective tissue between this new film and the earlier outings. Sadly, this was the last time that Todd was able to play the part though, as he passed away in November of 2024. Number 2. Ellen Burstyn, The Exorcist. In terms of the latent period between horror franchise appearances, nobody beats Ellen Burstyn, who at 91 years of age recently played a supporting role in The Exorcist Believer, reprising her role of Chris McNeil from the original Exorcist 50 years prior. For the great many Exorcist fans who simply felt the franchise was thoroughly played out by this point, Burstyn's role was basically Believer's primary selling point, a clear attempt to bridge the gap between old and new eras of Exorcist lore. Granted, though Burstyn gave it her all as usual, fan reception to Chris's role in the sequel was heavily polarised, largely due to a scene where she's attacked and blinded, adding a grim postscript to Chris's already traumatic story. For Burstyn's part, she freely admitted that she only reprised the role to help fund a scholarship programme for actors, which is about as noble a use of the fat studio payday as there ever has been. Number 1. Angus Scrimm, Phantasm. Angus Scrimm is best known for playing the Tall Man, the unforgettable, imposing antagonist of Don Coscarelli's cult favourite Phantasm franchise. Scrimm played the Tall Man in each of the series' 5 movies, and while there were healthy gaps between most entries, when a sequel to 1998's Phantasm 4 Oblivion failed to materialise more than a decade later, many fans seemed to accept that the franchise was most likely over. But after years of stalled attempts to get another sequel made, Phantasm Ravager finally came out in 2016, with Scrimm reprising his villain role for the first time in 18 years. Though Angus Scrimm's screen time is fairly curtailed throughout, most likely due to him being well into his mid-80s at this point, it's still neat to see him play the Tall Man one last time, especially with the added poignance that the actor passed away shortly before the film's release.